Okay, we're going to continue on with the story by Captain Link OLeary, telling the story of the old last days of the Erie Canal. There was a passenger business on the Erie Canal, and when I was a hoggy, but even then the railroads was getting a lot of the travelers away from the packet boats. Now, he was a hoggy. That means he ran the mules. He was on the mules, hogging. Okay. But the railroads were stealing a lot of the business away from the packet boats. Back before the war, the Civil War, I mean, the westbound boats was loaded with Irish and Germans. There was a packet skipper named Joe McCarthy who used to get a lot of that business. And I heard that it's on account of him that the snakes left the towpath. See, McCarthy hated snakes. One day, his boat was going through a regular school of water snakes, and one of his passengers, an Irish greenhorn, fresh from the Limerick, was watching, and he fell overboard. The poor devil didn't have a chance to wash since then, since he had left Ireland, and there was still enough Irish dirt on him that the water that touched him was poisonous to the water snakes, and they curled up and died. That gave McCarthy the idea. Most of the Irish had a little box with them, filled with dirt from their old fields in Ireland, and McCarthy made every one of them give him a handful of it. He was tired of having his hoggies walk over the rattlesnakes sleeping on the warm towpath. And when he had a bushel or so of the dirt, he scattered it along the canal bank. And they say that from that day the snakes keep away from the canal. And I know I never saw all of them when I was canaling. Okay. Let me try and pick up the reading ability here a little bit. Oh, yeah. These help a lot. Okay. They tell some strange tales about this McCarthy. He was the strongest man on the canal. One night, when he was driving the mules, he broke the whiffle tree and ran away. McCarthy just put the tow rope over his shoulder and hauled that boat for 5 hours looking for those mules. Not only that, but after about 2 hours, the boat, a leaky old tub filled with crushed limestone, ripped her bottom out on a sunken rock, and McCarthy trotted along just the same. He hauled that barge along the canal for 7 miles. As luck would have it, the moon came out just before he got to the aqueduct over the Genesee River in Rochester. And he might have pulled the bottom of the aqueduct out and let the whole canal go down the river. Anyway, the state legislature voted him $500 for digging the canal 2 feet deeper from Pittsburgh to Rochester. It's quite a man, so McCarthy. This same McCarthy used to spend a lot of time training his mules to do tricks. He had been a tightrope walker, and he taught his mules to walk back to the boat along the tow rope when he changed teams. Instead of waiting for the bridge to be put out. Okay, let me read that again. He was a tightrope walker, and he taught his mules to walk back to the boat along the tow rope when he changed teams, instead of waiting for the bridge to be put out. But one night he forgot to tie the free end of the rope to the post on a towpath, and he only got about halfway back to the boat before the slack came in, and the line they had all went out into the water, and the mules could swim, but McCarthy couldn't. Okay. Sorry about my reading there. It was really too bad about McCarthy getting drowned, for he was well thought of along the canal. The quarrymen at the Eagle Harbor was having a dance one time. They told McCarthy to be sure to come, and he was at Spencerport, headed towards Eagle Harbor, when he got word that the town hall had burned down and the dance was off. But McCarthy loved to dance, and he wasn't going to let a fire stop him. He had a big flat-bottom boat, and he took aboard enough paving blocks so that she was just scraping the bottom of the canal. And when he hitched his fastest mules to the boat, and they came up to the towpath a-flying, when he got to Eagle Harbor, he unloaded those paving blocks and heaved the boat over bottom side up, right up against the bank, and the sand and the mud on the bottom of the canal had smoothed off those rough planks. They was smooth as glass. When they dried off, McCarthy waxed them, and they had their dance after all, on the underside of McCarthy's boat. Things were pretty quiet along the canal after that, until the big drought. It got so hot that the whole of Lake Erie and all the feeders along the canal couldn't hardly keep it from going dry. They arrested a woman in Palmyra for filling her wash tub from the Erie and stranding 10 boats along the towpath. Walkers along the canal all summer were pulling up weeds and grapevines so their roots couldn't suck water, and they carried shotguns to shoot crows and sparrows that tried to take a drink. Down at Utica, the farmers got so desperate they dug up their plants out of the fields and loaded them in wheelbarrows and run them over to the canal to dip the roots in water. There was one fellow who brought over a runty squash vine that he had kept alive for weeks by spitting on it now and then, and it had 2 or 3 nubbin squash on it. He stuck the roots in the canal, and that vine was so thirsty it dragged the water out like a big hose and left 3 miles of bottom bare. The squashes started to swell like rubber balloons, and the farmer had to run like the devil for 10 minutes to keep from getting squashed. Then a section of the vine went past him, traveling over like a racer snake, and he grabbed it. And his hand closed on a flower bud. The bud turned into a flower and then into a squash so fast it blew his hand off, like a fistful of gunpowder would. He made a living for years after that, peddling section of the stems from the leaves of the vine. They used to use them for drainage tile. This is BS now. You're scratching your head, it's BS. This is a captain telling a story, a yarn, spinning a yarn, as you'd say. Okay. Well, the mules have gone, and most of them, all those old canalers, have gone. But so far as I can see, this thing they call the barge canal might as well go too. It wouldn't do any harm if they took all the barges off. Then what would we have? Why, a big lake running right across the state with room for millions of fish. Here's thousands of people in the state on relief. That's like welfare. Here's what he says. Thousands of people in the state are on relief. Fill the canal with fish and let the reliefers fish. Of course, there's Lake Ontario, as you say, just 8 or 10 miles north. All right, then. Let's make the canal a saltwater lake by pumping it full of Atlantic Ocean and stock it with saltwater fish. The doctors say they're healthier anyway. Being on relief or working on one of them damn WPA jobs isn't much fun. It would be a whole lot better if we could go down to the canal banks and catch a mess of mackerel for dinner, or maybe codfish and smelts. With salt water in the canal, it wouldn't freeze, and we could all fish year-round. Maybe the saltwater canal is just the thing we need to get New York State out of depression. Yeah, that's the end of that story. It's just a little booklet that Papa found in California. But he knew that I moved to the Erie Canal Historic Corridor, and he got this. And here, Pammy Parker, old Pammy Parker sent me part of a song, but here's one of the old ones that was written down here. 15 years on the Erie Canal. Are you ready? I've got an old mule, her name is Sal. 15 years on the Erie Canal. She's a good old worker, a good old pal. 15 years on the Erie Canal. Low Bridge, everybody down. Low Bridge, we're coming to town. You might tell your neighbor, and you can always tell your pal if you've ever navigated on the Erie Canal. Giddy up there, gal. We passed that lock. We'll make gal beyond 6 o'clock. So one more trip, and then we'll go right straight back to Buffalo. I don't have to call when I want my Sal. 15 years on the Erie Canal. She trots from the stall like a good old gal. 15 years on the Erie Canal. Low Bridge, everybody down. Low Bridge, I've got the finest mule in town. She's perfect, perfect lady, and she blushes like a gal if she hears you sing about her and the Erie Canal. Drop a tear for Bigfoot Sal, the best damn cook on the Erie Canal. She aimed for heaven, but she went to hell. 15 years on the Erie Canal. Now the missioner said she died in sin, but Henry said it'd be too much gin. There weren't no bar where she hasn't been, from Albany to Buffalo. 15 years on the Erie Canal.